Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, even when it's your own family? That was me. Last year, at my sister Danielle's birthday dinner, my parents live in this giant house on the hill, white stone driveway, rosebush trimmed like royalties coming over. I parked 2 blocks away. I didn't want anyone to see my old car coughing up the street. I was nervous. Not because of Danielle, but because I already knew how it would feel. Like always, still I showed up. I smiled. I wore the dress my friend helped me sew, the one that made me feel proud, not expensive, and I brought a gift. A small wooden box I carved myself. Took me weeks. I painted tiny flowers on the lid, her favorites, blue hydrangeas. When I handed it to her, she smiled. That short kind of smile. You know the one. The thanks, but not really kind. Then Dad cleared his throat. Before dessert, he said, lifting a glass, we have something special to give Danielle. I thought it might be a bracelet or some kind of family heirloom. Nope, Dad, he pulled out a white envelope, thick, sealed. Serious dash looking Danielle opened it and gasped. Oh my God, she said. Is this real? It's a check, Mom beamed. $560,000. The room went quiet except for Danielle squealing. Everyone clapped. I just sat there, still holding my fork. That's seed money for her next venture, Dad said proudly. A woman like her deserves to go big. Then he turned to me, and Claire, he added, chuckling like it was cute. Maybe if you stopped dreaming and started working, you wouldn't be so behind. The air got thick. I looked around. No one said anything. Not even my cousin, who used to call me her favorite. Just silence. And that silence, it was louder than the insult. My cheeks burned, but I smiled. That smile I'd learned to wear since I was 8. I picked up my glass and toasted quietly. To Danielle. And that was the moment. Right there, when something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. Not in that second. I was done trying to be enough. Done explaining my choices. Done handing love to people who measured it in dollars. I excused myself after cake. They didn't notice. I walked to my car, 2 blocks away, and sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel. It was so quiet. Just the sound of leaves brushing the windshield. And that's when it hit me. That's when I stopped calling them. That silence doesn't mean surrender. It means something else is starting. Have you ever chosen silence over shouting? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if you've ever felt like the forgotten one, like maybe you were always the second thought, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone here, because what came next, they never saw it coming. After that night at Danielle's birthday, my phone stayed quiet. No calls, no texts. At first, I kept checking like maybe they'd notice. They didn't. I'd wake up before sunrise for work, make my coffee, and scroll through photos of my family on social media. Trips to Italy, new cars, smiles so bright you'd think no one was missing, and in a way, I guess no one was. I felt like a ghost. Breathing, moving, but invisible to the people who were supposed to see me. I'd sit in my tiny apartment at night, the kind where the radiator hisses and the pipes groan like old men. I'd stare at the walls and think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am behind. But then another voice, softer but mine, would whisper, or maybe you're just different. I tried to focus on work. 2 jobs, long hours. Cashier by day, dog walker by evening. I'd come home smelling like soap and fur. My shoes worn thin. Some nights I'd put the wooden carving tools back on my table and run my fingers over them. The things I made, they didn't cost much, but they felt like me, real, quiet, patient. One Sunday, while cleaning, I found a box of old letters under my bed. Most of them were from no one important, but one was from my grandmother, the only person who ever called me bright. Her handwriting tilted sideways. It said, "You see people clearly. That's your gift. One day it will be your power." I sat there on the floor, reading those words over and over. It felt like she was sitting beside me again, holding my hand, and for the first time since that dinner, my chest loosened. I realized something. Being invisible to them didn't mean I didn't exist. It meant I was free to see everything they couldn't. I started noticing things at work. How customers treated cashiers. How small kindnesses shifted an entire mood. I started keeping notes, not about them, but about me. What I liked, what I wanted, what I would no longer accept. Little by little, I stopped looking at their lives online. I deleted the apps. I blocked their updates. I let the silence grow until it felt like space instead of punishment. But inside that space, something else began to stir. A thought, a question, a spark. Because if my grandmother was right, if seeing people clearly was my gift, what could I do with it? I didn't have the answer yet, but I could feel it rising, like a storm I couldn't see but could smell in the air. And one night, while flipping through the rest of the letters, I saw a folded slip of paper tucked behind another card. It wasn't a letter. It was a bank statement, old, faded, with my name on it. It made my stomach tighten, because on that slip was something I had never known, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just about being invisible. Something was hidden, and I was about to find it. That old bank slip sat on my kitchen table for hours. I couldn't stop staring at it. It had my name on the top, but the numbers were off. Much lower than I remembered. It was from a trust my parents had always mentioned when I was little. They used to say, "One day, this will help you both start your lives." Half for me, half for Danielle. Only the statement didn't show half. It showed crumbs. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Why would they give me a fake number? Where was the rest? I started digging, not on impulse, carefully. Quietly. First, I called the bank, pretending I'd lost my password. The woman on the phone hesitated. Then she said, "Oh, this account was merged 2 years ago. The remaining balance was transferred." Transferred. But not to me. I wrote the date down on a sticky note. 2 years ago. Danielle's big business launch. My stomach twisted. I opened my laptop and searched public records. It took hours, but then there it was. Danielle's name tied to 3 foreclosures. Not 1, 3. The business my parents bragged about. It wasn't an investment. It was a bailout. They'd use my half of the trust to cover her debts, to save her name, to keep her looking like a success. And they'd sat at that table, smiled in my face, and called me behind. I felt something inside me harden. Not anger, clarity. For the first time, I saw my family not as parents and a sister, but as people making choices. People who had taken what was mine and handed it to someone else because it looked better on paper. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. I thought about all the birthdays, the holidays, the phone calls where they told me to try harder. I thought about carving that wooden box for Danielle, painting each petal by hand, and her squealing over a check that was half my life. The room felt colder, quieter. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just kept writing everything down, dates, numbers, records, like a witness to my own story. Because here's the thing about betrayal. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can only decide what to do with it. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew this much. If they thought I was invisible before, they were about to see how wrong they were. And the next morning, when the sun came through my window, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't even confront them. I would go silent. And in that silence, I would build something new. I folded the bank slip, tucked it into my journal, and wrote 7 words at the top of a blank page. They didn't just call me a failure. Then I added 3 more. They used my future. And as I put my pen down, a strange calm filled me. Not peace, but power dot, because now I knew the truth. And soon they would too. The morning after I uncovered the truth, I woke up with a kind of stillness I'd never felt before. It was like standing at the edge of a frozen lake, cold but steady. I didn't feel like screaming. I didn't feel like calling them. I felt focused. I went to work as usual, but something inside me had changed. When customers handed me money, I saw numbers differently. When people talked about investing, I listened with new ears. I started to see the map of my own life, not just the path they'd drawn for me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal open. In one column, I wrote everything they'd taken from me. In another, I wrote everything they couldn't take. My patience, my gift for seeing people, my hands, my mind, my time. I underlined that last one. Time. That was mine now. I began spending my evenings learning instead of scrolling. I signed up for a free online course on money, basics, budgeting, saving. Then I moved on to business. Classes, marketing, negotiation, words. I used to think were for other people suddenly became mine. I cut the cable, sold the extra things I didn't need, put the money into a small savings account. Every dollar was like a brick, building something no one else could see. Weeks passed. I stopped waiting for calls. I stopped hoping for apologies. My silence became my space. And inside that space, I built a little world just for me. On weekends, I made crafts, not for gifts, but for an online shop I quietly opened. I took photos of my work on my kitchen counter, listed them on a small website. At first, nothing happened. But slowly, orders trickled in. A wooden box here, a carved spoon there. Each order felt like a small yes to myself. Sometimes, late at night, doubt would creep in. I'd think about Danielle's glossy life, the money, the applause. Then I'd remember the bank slip, the lies, the way my father laughed when he called me behind. I'd whisper to myself, not behind, building. And that whisper became a rhythm. While they were busy showing off, I was busy stacking bricks no one could see. 3 months later, my savings account had doubled. The shop had steady orders. My full-time job started feeling like just one piece of a larger puzzle. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell friends. I didn't announce anything. I stayed quiet, but inside, the noise was all progress. Then, one evening while scrolling through class options, I saw a program on personal branding and storytelling. Something about it made my heart race. It wasn't about carving wood. It was about carving a new identity. I hesitated. The price was higher than I was used to. But my grandmother's words floated back. One day, it will be your power. I clicked enroll. Just like that, I chose myself as the confirmation email popped up on my screen. I smiled. Not because I'd figured everything out, but because for the first time, my choices were mine, not a reaction to theirs. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my tiny apartment. It was still small, still old, but it was mine. And in my mind, I could already see something bigger forming. If they thought I was invisible before, they'd never see this coming, because silence isn't weakness. Silence is a seed, and mine had just started to grow. A year passed. Not all at once, of course. It came slowly, in long nights, quiet winds, and small steps no one clapped for. But it added up. My tiny online shop. It grew. At first, just a few orders a month. Then one day, a woman from Oregon messaged me saying, "Your box reminded me of my mother." I cried when I opened it. That message. I printed it out and taped it on my fridge because it reminded me I wasn't just selling wood. I was making something that mattered. By month 8, I had regular customers, a few repeat buyers. People were leaving reviews. They didn't know my story, they just liked my hands, and that meant more to me than any family toast ever had. I'd moved to a new apartment by then. Nothing fancy, but it had big windows and enough sunlight to warm the floor by 9 a.m. It smelled like fresh coffee and cedar shavings. It felt like freedom. I made my own schedule, worked on my brand, took online classes, even started teaching others how to sell handmade items. My business didn't make millions, but it paid my bills. It gave me purpose, and it was all mine. One day, I got an email from a woman named Sasha. She hosted a podcast for women rebuilding after rejection, betrayal, and loss. She bought one of my boxes. She wanted to know if I'd share my story, the quiet version. No names, no drama, just truth. At first, I froze. Me? Talk about all of it? But then I thought about that night, that dinner table, my father's words, Danielle's check, the silence that followed. I emailed back, yes. The day of the podcast, my heart thumped so loud I thought they'd hear it in the mic. I told my story in simple pieces. I said they gave her $560,000. I got silence. So I used it. We talked about starting over, about choosing yourself when no one else does, about learning that quiet doesn't mean weak. It means building. Alone until you don't need permission anymore. I didn't expect much. But by the next morning, my inbox had over 400 messages. Women from all over the country, even outside the US, wrote to say, "Me too. I felt invisible too. I left, too." It was overwhelming in the best way. By the end of the week, I had 5 new wholesale requests, 3 interview invites, and double the traffic on my site. I remember sitting at my desk, reading through all the messages and suddenly laughing. Not in a mean way, but in a free, shocked, joyful way, because for so long, I believed their version of me. The failure, the small one, the one who didn't get it, and here I was, helping strangers, running a business, living a life that looked nothing like theirs and everything like mine. But the part that hit hardest, Danielle saw it. She followed me from a fake account. I knew it was her. The username had her birth year, and the profile liked every single photo of my shop. She never messaged, never said anything. But she watched. And that, honestly, was enough. Because she didn't see me fall. But now she had to watch me rise. And just when I thought the silence was still holding, I got a message, not from Danielle, but from them, from my parents. The message popped up like a ghost I forgot I was still haunted by. "Hey, sweetie. We were wondering if you'd like to come to dinner. It's been a while." Signed, Mom. That was it. No mention of Danielle. No mention of the check. No apology. Just dinner. I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over delete. But I didn't press it. Instead, I whispered, "Let's see what they want." Because let's be honest, they weren't reaching out for nothing. Not after all this time. Not after silence. So I went, not dressed to impress, just dressed like myself. Simple blouse, clean jeans, hair in a braid. No makeup, no mask. The house hadn't changed. Same perfect lawn, same white columns, same cold feeling. Behind the door. My mother answered like I'd never been gone. "Oh, Claire, you look healthy. Not pretty. Not good. Healthy. Right." Danielle was already at the table, sipping wine with one perfectly manicured hand and scrolling on her phone with the other. She glanced at me like I was a stranger who vaguely looked familiar. "Hey, she said, not looking up. Hey, I answered back, cool and calm. Dinner was awkward. They made small talk. Mom complimented Danielle's new shoes. Dad brought up some neighbors' landscaping. No one asked about my business. No one mentioned the podcast, but I knew they knew. Then, as Mom cleared the plates, Dad leaned forward like we were suddenly in a meeting. We've been thinking, he said. You've done well, and there's a new opportunity we'd like to offer you. I tilted my head. An opportunity? He smiled that fake polite smile I'd seen him use with strangers. We're planning to invest in a property under a family name. For trust and tax reasons, it'd help if your name was on the paperwork. There it was. The ass thought they didn't want me back. They wanted what I'd built. My name. My credibility. They wanted the version of me that strangers trusted, not the daughter they once called behind. I looked over at Danielle, still sipping wine, still scrolling, still silent. I took a breath and said, let me get this straight. You want to use my name to make your deal look cleaner? Dad shifted. It's not like that. It's mutually beneficial. For who? I asked. Silence. Then Mom chimed in. Claire, we're trying to include you. I almost laughed. Include me? They excluded me from my own future, drained my trust, humiliated me, disappeared me, and now that I had value, they wanted to include me. I sat up straighter. No, I said simply. I'm not interested. My father blinked like he didn't understand the word. Danielle finally looked up. Wow, you're really gonna let your pride get in the way of something big? I turned to her. No, I'm letting my peace stay right where it belongs. She rolled her eyes. You think you're better than us now? I smiled, soft and sure. No, I think I'm finally not afraid of you. I stood up, thanked my mother for dinner, and walked out without another word. The air outside felt different, lighter, like I just walked out of a story. I didn't have to live in anymore, but I wasn't done. They had used my name before without asking, and now? Now I had one more thing to say. I walked away from that dinner without slamming a door. No dramatic exit. No raised voices. Just one word. No. And let me tell you, that one word carried more power than anything I'd ever said before. It echoed in me for days. Not just as an answer, but as a reminder of who I'd become. Because for so long, I said yes just to keep the peace. Yes when I wanted to cry. Yes when I was being stepped on. Yes when everything inside me was screaming don't. But now I said no with my whole chest and no shame. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not in my journal this time, but in a document I planned to share with the world. It wasn't a revenge post. Not a look what they did to me story. It was something quieter, stronger. A piece called, When They Called Me a Failure. I didn't use names, didn't mention cities, but the truth was all there. How they praised one child and forgot the other. How silence became survival. How choosing yourself can sometimes look like walking away with nothing but your name and turning it into something. I sent it to Sasha, the woman from the podcast. She loved it. Said, this is going to hit people deep. And she was right. When the piece went live, it spread like wildfire. Comments, emails, shares. People didn't ask who my family was. They just said, thank you for saying what I couldn't. I felt this in my bones. I've been the forgotten one too. It was no longer about my story. It became ours. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the community started seeing me. Really seeing me. I was invited to speak at an online summit for women rebuilding their lives. A company reached out to feature my handmade products in a holiday catalog. And a local college emailed, asking if I'd consider teaching a short course on creative business building. I said yes. to all of it because these were my yeses now. Not pity invitations, not fake inclusion, but real respect built from my own two hands. One day, I got a notification. Danielle had tagged me in a post. Yes, publicly. First time in years. It was a photo of us from childhood. Her caption said, "So proud of my little sister. She's come a long way." I stared at it, felt nothing. No warmth, no fire, just a dull echo of the girl who used to want that kind of praise. I didn't respond, didn't repost, didn't text because I wasn't building for recognition anymore. I was building for peace, and Danielle, she could tag me all she wanted, but she'd never understand what it cost me to get here because she never had to climb out of silence. She never had to learn the power of no. And that power, it changed everything. I no longer chased approval. I no longer explained myself. I no longer waited for a seat at their table because I'd built my own, and the view is so much better from here. But just when I thought the story was settling, life handed me something unexpected. A letter. Not an email. Not a message. A real handwritten letter from my mother. It came on a Thursday, tucked between a grocery coupon flyer and a bill. A cream-colored envelope with careful handwriting. My mother's. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, fed the dog, swept the kitchen twice because the truth is, I was scared. Not of what she'd say, but of what it might pull out of me. Eventually, I sat down, slid my finger under the flap, unfolded the paper. It was just one page. "Claire, I read what you wrote. I knew it was about us." At first, I was angry. Then I realized I wasn't angry at you. I was ashamed. We didn't see you. We should have. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know. I see you now. Love, Mom. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there holding the paper, feeling the weight of all the years in a single paragraph. She saw me now, but only after thousands of strangers did, only after the silence became too loud to ignore. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with my grandmother's note, not because I forgave her. Not yet, but because I wanted to keep that moment safe. For me, it meant something. Not everything, but something. A few days later, Sasha asked if I'd like to write a second piece. She said people were still talking about the first one. So I did. This one was called "When You Learn to Stop Waiting." I told the story of walking away, not in anger, but in dignity. About how sometimes the strongest revenge is simply peace. The post took off even faster than the first. Someone from a publishing house emailed me. They wanted to turn my story into a book, a collection of essays about quiet strength. I thought about it for a while, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be ready. Eventually, I said yes. The book didn't just tell my story, it held pieces of everyone who'd written me. Every invisible daughter, every overlooked sister, every quiet woman who was told to be grateful for scraps. It was called "The Gift of Silence." And it became something more than I ever dreamed. Libraries ordered it, book clubs read it. One woman sent me a video of her teenage daughter reading it out loud. I watched with tears in my eyes. They didn't just read my pain. They saw my power, and that was the part my family never understood. Thought I needed money, recognition, a seat at their table. But what I needed was to see myself. To stop chasing love that came with strings. To stop begging to be understood. To let go and rebuild from what was left. And it turned out what was left was more than enough. But just when everything felt still again, I got another message. This time, it wasn't from Mom. It was from him. It came late, almost midnight. I was in bed, reading messages from readers, when the notification lit up my phone. can we talk? That was all it said. No name. But I didn't need one dot, it was my father. I stared at the screen. Heart still. Mind racing. For a moment, I wondered if I should ignore it. Just block the number and move on, dot. But then something inside me whispered, you don't have to talk for him. Talk for you. So I replied, tomorrow, 3 p.m., the cafe near the lake. I chose the place. Neutral ground. Somewhere with light, people, and open air, dot. The next day, I arrived early. Chose a table by the window. Ordered my tea and waited, dot. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller. Not physically, just less towering, less sharp. Like time had shaved down the edges of the man I once feared disappointing. He sat down slowly. Didn't smile. Didn't joke. Just looked at me and said, I didn't expect you to go through with it. I blinked. Go through with what? All of it, he said. The writing. The business. The silence. I let that sit between us, dot. Then he added, we thought. You needed us. And there it was. We thought you needed us, dot. I took a breath. Not out of anger, but out of peace, I said. I did need someone. But it turns out, it wasn't you. He nodded slowly. Didn't fight it. Didn't defend. Just sat there, eyes on the table. We sat in silence for a while. Not the heavy kind. The kind that happens when everything has already been said, dot. Then he stood. Placed his hand on the table like he might say more, but instead he said, I'm glad you're okay, and walked out. I stayed seated, sipped the rest of my tea, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter begging to be seen. I felt like a woman, whole and steady, watching a man finally realize what he'd lost. I didn't cry. Didn't call my mom afterward. Didn't write a post about it because closure doesn't always come with a handshake. Sometimes it's just a moment when your heart no longer aches for what it never got. That night, I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote, I didn't win. I didn't lose, I just let go. And with that, I closed the book. But life wasn't done surprising me, dot, because 1 year later, on the same day they gave Danielle that check, I had something else to celebrate. 1 year, 12 full months since the dinner where they handed Danielle a $560,000 check and called me a failure, but this time I didn't sit in silence. I didn't shrink. I didn't wait for anyone to remember me. I celebrated, dot, not an anniversary of pain, but of freedom. I rented a cabin in the mountains, brought my journal, my laptop, and a few women I met online, each one rebuilding her life after being torn down by someone she loved. We called it the Reset Weekend. No fancy agenda, just storytelling, healing, and fresh air. We laughed. We cried. We made pancakes and danced barefoot in the kitchen. The first night, we built a fire. Everyone took turns sharing what they'd walked away from. A toxic marriage. A mother who always made them feel like a burden. A boss who never said thank you. When it was my turn, I smiled and said, I walked away from being invisible. They didn't ask for details. They just nodded, dot, because they knew. We sat under the stars after that, wrapped in blankets, drinking tea, journaling quietly. I wrote, they said I was behind, but they didn't see the road I was building. The next morning, I got up early, watched the sun rise through the trees, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop, dot. My second book was due soon, the one about rebuilding, not just surviving. Chapter 9 was still blank, dot, so I typed, sometimes the thing they give your sister is money. Sometimes it's praise. But what they accidentally give you is fire. And I kept writing. For 3 straight hours. No breaks. Just flow, dot, because when you're no longer writing for approval, you write in truth. And truth moves fast, dot. Later that afternoon, We sat in a circle and shared what we'd written. One woman said, "You make me believe I don't need permission anymore." I smiled. That's the point. When I got home, there was a small package waiting at my door. No return name. Just a gold ribbon. I opened it slowly. Inside was a leather journal. On the first page, in delicate handwriting, it said, "I gave you silence. You gave yourself a voice. I'm sorry." Mom, I traced the words with my fingers. Didn't cry. Didn't call her, but I placed it on my shelf next to my grandmother's letter. My archive of healing, of truth, of becoming. I didn't need to fix what was broken. I just needed to honor what had grown, and what had grown was me. A few weeks later, a young reporter asked to interview me for a women's magazine. At the end, she said, "Is this story about the check real?" I smiled, tilted my head, and said, "He handed her $560,000. They handed me silence, and I turned it into something they'll never forget." She looked at me wide-eyed. "What did you give back?" I grinned. "My signature," I said. "And a story." Now, whenever people ask what changed everything, I tell them, it wasn't the money. It wasn't the podcast. It wasn't even the books. It was the moment I stopped calling them and started calling myself worthy. So if you've ever felt like the one they overlooked, the one they underestimated, the one they called behind, I hope you'll remember this. They may give someone else the check, but they can't buy what you build in silence. And one day, they'll see it, because the person they tried to erase, she's unforgettable now. And you? Have you ever been the one they counted out, only to come back stronger? Tell me your story in the comments. I'll be reading every single one.